5:05 and welcome into the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. A good Tuesday morning to you. All eyes on the tropics this morning as Hurricane Erin continues to churn away. It is now a Category 3 storm, fortunately expected to stay offshore. However, over the last couple of days, the storm will bring some pretty serious impacts to the North Carolina coast, particularly those in the Outer Banks later this week. While it was predominantly a Category 4 storm yesterday, it was downgraded at 11 p.m. last night to a Category 3 storm. And as of the latest information out of the National Hurricane Center just a couple of minutes ago at 5 a.m., the storm currently has maximum sustained winds at 115 miles an hour. Its minimum pressure, 955 millibars, moving northwest at 7 miles per hour. Coastal flooding could begin as early as Tuesday, peaking on Wednesday and Thursday, with a flood watch being in effect for the entire North Carolina coastline. However, the biggest impacts expected, especially in the Outer Banks. As of 5 p.m. last night, a tropical storm watch was issued for portions of the Outer Bank, including the Pamlico Sound. A tropical storm watch means that tropical storm conditions are possible within the watch area. That will be between Wednesday and Thursday for those in the Outer Banks. There's also a very important storm surge watch. That's for Cape Lookout to Duck, North Carolina. In some of those areas, there are mandatory evacuations that are in place as North Carolina's Highway 12, which runs through the Outer Banks, could be in a situation where it is impassable due to erosion and overwash from the storm. States of emergency continue in places for Hyde and Dare counties, and even further south, down now outside of the Wilmington area, the town of Wrightsville Beach issued a no swimming advisory from today through Friday. This is due to very strong rip currents that are already ahead of this storm, as lifeguards at Wrightsville Beach reported between 60 and 80 rip current rescues on Monday. A very dangerous situation unfolding over at Wrightsville Beach. Similar situation up at Surf City. The fire department there reported more than 20 rip current rescues on 20. And Camp Lejeune leaders will temporarily close the Onslow Beach at noon today due to dangerous rip currents, high surf, and other anticipated weather effects from Hurricane Erin. The storm will stay likely a couple of 100 miles off of the North Carolina coast. However, some of those continued risk, again, high rip currents, parts of Highway 12 becoming impassable, and especially for some areas in the Outer Banks, some tropical storm force gusts are possible with the most recent forecast of the storm. However, those life-threatening conditions could persist in some areas. Authorities in the Outer Banks are noting they're not taking any chances with those states of emergency being issued for Dare and Hyde counties this morning. Those coastal impacts will really could begin later today, but are really set to peak Wednesday through Thursday, as some of those systems or some of those folks in those areas are not taking any chances and making sure they are prepared. Fortunately for the main track of the storm, it is expected to again stay anywhere between probably 150 and 300 miles off the coast of the Outer Banks. However, the impacts will continue to be felt. Fortunately, it will split that gap between the United States and Bermuda. We'll keep an eye on the details over the next couple of days as this storm continues. If you have any plans to make it to the beach throughout the rest of this week, you are definitely going to want to stay out of the water. That rip current risk is a killer, unfortunately. And down, as I mentioned, down in Wrightsville Beach, they have put out a no swimming advisory, something not very common for the very busy Wrightsville Beach town all the way through Friday. We'll continue to track Hurricane Erin and its potential impacts on North Carolina right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. In some other statewide news this morning, an interesting story we're tracking out of a new study from North Carolina State University analyzing the economic impact of a Major League Baseball team in both Raleigh and Charlotte. Following substantial damage from Hurricane Helene and Milton for a period of time, the Tampa Bay Rays were potentially looking to relocate while their stadium underwent extensive repairs and construction. This brought both Raleigh and Charlotte, as well as several other cities throughout the Southeast, into the running for potential new homes. However, a new study from Dr. Michael Walden, an NC State economist and professor, compared Raleigh and Charlotte to 8 other cities that have been mentioned as a potential location for a Major League Baseball team. They include places like Nashville, Orlando, San Antonio, San Jose, Salt Lake City, as well as I mentioned, Raleigh and Charlotte. The analysis looked at these cities across several feasibility factors, including regional population, projected future population growth, workers earning, media size, and distance from an existing MLB team. One of the other primary contenders is Nashville, Tennessee, during a recent visit to Covenant Park Health for a Knoxville Smokies game. That's the minor league team out in Nashville. Governor Bill Lee advocated to get a full Major League Baseball team in that area. According to the U.S. Census, the Raleigh-Durham-Chapel Hill area combined statistical region ranks as the 31st largest by population out of 181 in the nation. Comparatively, according to the study, the Charlotte Concord CSA ranks 19th in population and was the 11th fastest growing during the same time period. According to the study, like Raleigh and Charlotte, Nashville has been an up-and-coming city in the 21st century. Nashville already has an NFL and NHL team, so the city has been tested at the major league level. However, residents may come from MLB owners in Cincinnati, St. Louis, and Atlanta who would consider some of their fan bases to still be in Tennessee. Looking at some other details out of the study back here in North Carolina, an MLB stadium would cost a pretty penny. Economists predict somewhere between $1 and $2 billion. In recent decades, state and local governments have footed the bill, expecting funds to be recovered from economic growth and additional spending attracted to the city as the home of an MLB stadium. There's also precedent for local investors to partially or fully fund the cost. Typically, teams are owned by a single individual or family, or maybe in some cases a group of investors. With that, however, a recent column from the John Locke Foundation, John Hood, who is a board member, has said decades of academic research shows that public funding of ballparks, stadiums, and arenas do not bring the economic benefit originally promised. Hood states that local and state governments do not derive sufficient return on investment in terms of job creation, economic gains, as well as other factors to justify, in some cases, multi-billion-dollar payouts. Money spent on tickets, concessions, and advertising products would have been better spent on other goods or services in the market besides building a physical stadium, according to Hood. And taxpayers would get a better ROI if the money were invested in the public services such as public safety, education, or infrastructure. Economists have projected that 3 effects, including direct, indirect, and induced costs, according to the study, would play this out and have something to do with that $1.5 to somewhere $2 billion price tag for a stadium. Now, nothing is guaranteed. It is not like North Carolina, either the Charlotte or Raleigh area are on the precipice of this major announcement. However, the MLB commissioner did make some interesting comments last week hinting at relocation or expansion. That, of course, puts 2 major metropolitans in our state on the lookout. We've got some additional details on this story this morning over on our website, carolinajournal.com. The headline, Study Raleigh-Charlotte Strong Contenders for MLB Team. You can read those details over there. Plus, we'll catch up with Katie Zender from carolinajournal.com coming up a little bit later on in the show to discuss some more details about this story. It's now 5:15 on the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We'll get a look at the roadways on your early Tuesday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Good Tuesday.
It's 5:20. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Last week, we talked about how there is a brand new U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of North Carolina. Well, he spoke late last week in an introductory news conference to outline his priorities for the coming year. Ellis Boyle is an Eastern North Carolina native, according to his new position by Attorney General Pam Bondi. As the U.S. Attorney, Boyle is the lead federal law enforcement officer for the 44 counties that make up the Eastern District of North Carolina. Boyle said late last week that his priorities will be combating illegal immigration as well as cracking down on fentanyl trafficking and use. Being very blunt in the news conference, saying, quote, "We have a clear mission. I will state it directly. In the Eastern District, we will protect law-abiding citizens, we will win trials, and we will hold criminals accountable." End quote there from Attorney Boyle. He takes office after the departure of Michael Easley Jr., who was appointed during the Biden administration. This is a very common practice. When administrations change, you get new U.S. attorneys across the United States, and that is exactly what has gone on in the Eastern District of North Carolina, which I'll note is a very large federal district, 44 counties taking place in the eastern half of the state. We'll continue to track any legal stories or cases that are relevant to you out of the Eastern District, of course, over on our website, carolinajournal.com, and right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:22, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Back in 2023, the North Carolina General Assembly passed a law banning transgender surgery for minors across the state of North Carolina. As you can imagine, immediately lawsuits followed that decision, and since then, the legal process has been unfolding. However, as of late, there's been a ask for a pause from both parties in this case. To walk us through some of the details this morning on why this is going on, Mitch Kokai of the John Locke Foundation joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Mitch, lawsuits happen pretty regularly, especially on hot-button political topics like transition surgery and things of that nature, but it looks like both parties are maybe asking the brake to be tapped a little bit. What's going on there?
Yes, and the reason is because the U.S. Supreme Court recently dealt with a similar. Parties are saying that it's time to kind of take a pause until some of these issues are worked out. You referenced the fact that in 2023, the General Assembly passed House Bill 808, which banned transgender surgeries for minors. Almost immediately, a lawsuit called Vo v. Mansfield was filed in federal court, and the case has been playing out over the past couple of years. But now the parties in the suit, both the plaintiffs who are challenging the law and the State General Assembly, which is defending the law, have asked for a pause because of the U.S. Supreme Court's recent decision in a case called Scarametti out of Tennessee. Now, in that case, the Supreme Court, in a split party line vote, you could say party line, the conservatives on one side, the liberals on the other, said that Tennessee's law, which banned puberty blockers and hormone therapies for minors, could stand. In the wake of that decision, the U.S. Supreme Court then said to the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, we're going to throw out your ruling in a different case, a case involving North Carolina's state health plan and whether it's going to cover medical procedures that are typically pursued by transgender patients. The Fourth Circuit had thrown out the law saying the state health plan would not cover those procedures and ordered the state health plan to cover them. But now that decision was thrown out by the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court said to the Fourth Circuit, reevaluate your decision in that state health plan case based on what we said in the Tennessee Scarametti case. So now the people in the Vo v. Mansfield case are saying, wait a minute, we shouldn't do anything until we find out what the Fourth Circuit says in the state health plan case. And once the state health plan case is resolved, then we can go back and decide what to do with the Vo v. Mansfield case. I think all parties are saying to the judge in the Vo v. Mansfield case, it wouldn't make sense for us to proceed, for there to be decisions, and then all of a sudden those get thrown out by what the Fourth Circuit or eventually the Supreme Court decides in this other case. Let's just pause, wait to see how the rest of the cases are resolved, and then we can go back and decide what, if anything, needs to happen with this case dealing with the House Bill 808 and the ban on transgender surgeries for minors in North Carolina.
So, Mitch, there's a lot of moving parts, pieces and parts here. You've got court cases from other states having a potential impact here on North Carolina. The thing I find interesting about it is you have multiple states, North Carolina and Tennessee, the two examples that we're talking about here, that have gone forward and passed a variety of state laws and put things in place only for down the line for the court system to catch up in it. I know dozens of other states have passed similar legislation and regulations surrounding this same issue. It's an interesting legal process to watch unfold as the General Assembly here in North Carolina seemingly was a couple of years ahead of the curve on what is now a much more larger national issue that is now being dealt with by the United States Supreme Court.
A number of states have been dealing with this issue over the years, and basically what you're seeing is as these laws are passed, almost immediately lawsuits follow, and it takes a while for these suits to get to higher stages of court. And depending on where these cases take place, various courts of appeals, along with district courts, of course, may have different opinions. In the Fourth Circuit, what happened was in a very interesting split where the whole circuit participated in a rare en banc hearing. It was an interesting split where the Democratic appointed justices on one side, who make up the majority, ruled one way, while the Republican appointed judges on the other side ruled another way. And because the Democratic appointed judges outnumber the Republican appointed judges on the Fourth Circuit, it was the Democratic position that ruled, that is, that the state health plan had to cover these procedures that are covered by that are sought by transgender patients. So that case was appealed by the state treasurer's office, because the treasurer's office oversees the health plan. That was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court basically just sat on that case for a while. Then once it came out with this decision in Tennessee, went back to the Fourth Circuit and said, we're vacating what you did before. Now you have to reevaluate it based on what we just said in the Tennessee case. And then it has a domino effect on these other cases, like the one that we're talking about now, on the ban on transgender surgeries for minors. I think what impresses me most about this is that both sides in the case realized that they should have the case paused at this point, that other cases are going to help decide whether this case can move forward. And it makes sense from the idea of judicial economy, saving time and money and expense of having all kinds of witnesses and depositions, just to wait and see how all of the rest of this plays out in the courts before deciding what to do next with this case.
Yeah, no question about it. That domino effect is interesting, and it's likely to come up in other cases in the state of North Carolina over a variety of other hot-button political issues that are seemingly rising to the top over the last couple of months. We'll keep an eye on this and all of those other cases. Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:29, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We will get another look at the roadways and your early Tuesday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks a lot. We have an incident.
Hot.
It's 5:36. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. All eyes continue on the Atlantic this morning as Hurricane Erin continues to churn away as now a Category 3 storm out of the 5 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Maximum sustained winds continue at 115 miles an hour as that storm is expected to get relatively close, likely within a couple of hundred miles of the North Carolina coast as we go through your Wednesday and Thursday of this week. No direct impacting landfall effects from this storm as it looks to split the gap between the United States and Bermuda as it goes through the recurve period of the storm, which is going on right now. However, while the storm is not making a direct impact, there are some major impacts that can be felt across predominantly the Outer Banks area. Coastal flooding is set to peak Wednesday and Thursday with a flood watch in effect for the entire North Carolina coastline. The biggest impacts being felt, as I noted, across the Outer Banks, where a tropical storm watch was issued at 5 p.m. last night for areas of the Outer Banks, including the Pamlico Sound, meaning that tropical storm conditions are likely within the next 2 days. So that'll be coming up Wednesday and into Thursday. And the very dangerous storm surge watch was also issued at 5 a.m. yesterday. That's for Cape Lookout to Duck, North Carolina. So that area is where that storm surge watch has been issued. Coincidentally, that's the same area where you've got some mandatory evacuations that are taking place as well. Those mandatory evacuations going into effect throughout the rest of your day today. Why is that the case? Well, portions of Highway 12 in the Outer Banks could become impassable due to erosion and overwash from high waves due to Hurricane Erin. A state of emergency, as we covered yesterday morning, is in place for both Hyde and Dare counties, and even further south down in Wrightsville Beach outside of the Wilmington area. The town has issued a rare no swimming advisory from Tuesday through Friday. This is due to very strong rip currents and large waves from the hurricane, as lifeguards at Wrightsville Beach reported more than 80 rip current rescues just yesterday. Similar situation unfolding a little bit further north in Surf City, where the fire department there reported 15 rip current rescues on Monday as well. Although Erin's center is forecasted to remain anywhere between about 150 and 300 miles offshore, life-threatening rip currents, coastal flooding, overwash, and extremely dangerous surf conditions do continue to be likely for the coast. Extensive beach erosion is also likely, with waves as high as 15 to 20 feet possible in some areas of the Outer Banks. That's where the brunt of the impacts are set to be felt here across the area. That is why authorities in those areas are not taking any chances with those emergency orders, or state of emergency orders, I should say, issued for Dare and Hyde County, with Hatteras Island also being under a mandatory evacuation this morning. We don't take the tropics lightly. Some big-time impacts over the last 10 years or so with tropical events, both in the eastern, central, and western parts of the state of North Carolina. Fortunately, Erin not expected to make a direct landfall here on the state of North Carolina. However, those impacts and risks will continue across the eastern half of the state. We'll continue to track it through tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 540, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Major League Baseball expansion has been a pretty large topic across the league for the last couple of years. However, here in North and South Carolina, you've got to go down to Atlanta, Georgia for the Braves, or up to Washington, D.C. for the Washington Nationals to see or get your baseball fix. To walk us through some details on some potential expansion this morning, Katie Zender, CarolinaJournal.com, joins us on the News Hour. Katie, we've got a brand new study out of NC State that's looking at the viability of two major metros across North Carolina that could potentially host a Major League Baseball team in the future. What are you learning from that?
Right. Good morning, Nick. Thank you for having me on. And yeah, so there's a new study from NC State professor and economist, Dr. Michael Walden, and he looks at Raleigh and Charlotte as well as 8 other cities that have been proposed as a potential home for a new MLB team. This discussion originally arose out of last year after Hurricane Helene in Milton. The Tampa Bay Rays Stadium had undergone significant destruction from those hurricanes, and so they were looking for a new, at least temporary home. And so that's where this discussion originally started. Now it looks like the Tampa Bay Rays are probably going to be staying within the state of Florida. A sale is currently pending to a Jacksonville developer for $1.7 billion. It is expected to close as soon as September, but there is still a lot of discussion about, a new MLB team and what city that might land in. So Charlotte and Raleigh, two of the biggest cities here in North Carolina, are both in the running for that, as well as other cities like Orlando, Nashville, Mexico City, and several other cities. And so what this study does is really looks at all these cities, compares them to each other, and looks at feasibility and economic impact on these cities. And Raleigh and Charlotte are top contenders in this study for the potential future home of an MLB team.
Well, Katie, we look across the state of North Carolina, and while we don't have a professional baseball team, we do in the Charlotte area have a football, basketball, and hockey team. You go up to the Raleigh area, you've got a professional hockey team that operates under there. So pro sports do exist pretty frequently across North, South Carolina. You go over to Tennessee, of course, you've got the Tennessee Titans and some other teams over there as well. So there is professional sports, just not a baseball team. The economic impact of something like this could be pretty substantial, could it not?
That's exactly right, Nick. And so that's one of the things that the study looks at is what is the economic impact on, bringing jobs in, bringing economy in. And you're right. So, we've got, kind of professional sports all around us. We've got the Carolina Hurricanes, and there is a minor league team in Charlotte. I believe they're called the Charlotte Knights. And then if you go over to Tennessee, again, they don't have an MLB team either, but they do have the Knoxville Smokies. And then Governor Bill Lee, who's the governor of Tennessee, is really advocating very strongly for Nashville to be the future home of the MLB team. He said recently, we need an MLB team in Tennessee, and I'm really hopeful that that's coming in. This is the future, and it's an exciting development right here in this town, and it's a part of what's to come in this state. So Governor Lee of Tennessee is really strongly advocating for Nashville. But so the study looks at a few different factors for feasibility, and there's a lot of factors that, kind of work into what is the feasibility of, supporting an MLB team. And so, there's population growth. And so the projected population rankings for 2050 show, really strong growth. Raleigh stands out, ranking second with an anticipated 45.8% increase, surpassing San Antonio, which is one of the other studies in the running, by an impressive 60.70% growth rate. Charlotte comes in sixth, and both of these cities are expected to outpace Nashville as far as growth, which is really interesting to note because Nashville is another one of those cities that has really been growing a lot in the last few years. But again, Raleigh has as well. We're seeing a lot of growth in the Raleigh area and in the Triangle area. One really important factor when it comes to looking at an MLB team is, of course, stadium location. Like, we're more than likely, if it were to come to Raleigh, we're going to have to build a new stadium because we don't really have a current location that's feasible for an MLB team. It is highly unlikely that the Durham Bulls Athletic Park would be converted, and that only seats 10,000. So that's unlikely to be, the future site of any potential MLB team. They would either have to, rebuild or, just find a different location because that facility just doesn't have the capacity to host an MLB team.
Well, Katie, let me jump in on that because that's one of the big concerns and questions with this. We've seen this take place in other states where you've got the enticing factor of a new stadium for maybe an expansion team or rebuilding a stadium for an already existing team. And there has been in many of these cases some public outcry about the amount of taxpayer dollars that are being used to fund what is a very lucrative business venture for the private industry, which of course would be a major sports team, which many equate to purchasing some sort of money printer with the amount that you're able to generate in terms of revenue.
Right. That's exactly right, Nick. So a lot of times these stadiums are funded by public money, which is, of course, taxpayer dollars. It's going to come from state or local government, which is, of course, coming from the tax payers, and sometimes it's a combination of both state and local. And the idea behind this is that they're going to earn that back in revenue. They're going to earn that back in, ticket sales, money that's being poured into the economy when people come in for these games. It might be, hotel reservations. It might be, meals that they buy, concessions, all of that kind of thing. Is that that money, that revenue that's put out by the government will be earned back through those kind of expenditures that wouldn't otherwise be brought in. But there's a lot of data that doesn't actually back that up. And so one of our John Locke Foundation board members, John Hood, said in a recent column that he wrote that there are decades worth of research that show that public funding of these, ballpark stadiums, entertainment arenas, et cetera, do not actually fulfill on the economic benefits promised. And he says that state and local governments don't derive the sufficient return on investment in job creation, economic gains, to justify the significant payout. So while you might be getting some money back, it's not enough to justify putting out so much taxpayer dollars, and money spent on tickets or concessions or anything like that would otherwise have been put back into other goods or services into that local market. And so the taxpayers would actually get a better ROI if their money were just invested into, public services such as public safety, education, or infrastructure. And so there is a lot of, data to back up that, hey, maybe this isn't the best way to be spending our taxpayer dollars. And not always are these funded by taxpayer dollars, but a lot of times they are. Sometimes they're funded by private investors. So that could be another option, that could be looked at as far as funding these stadiums.
It's definitely a very interesting study. We've got some additional details, including that full study from NC State on our website this morning, carolinajournal.com. We appreciate the update. Katie Zender joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:48, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We will get another look at the roadways on your Tuesday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Thank you, Nick. Looking good now.
Hot.
It's 5:54. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. The North Carolina Department of Commerce recently announced that its single-family housing program, also known as Renew NC, has received more than 1,000 applications. Construction is expected to begin on the first home within the next month. The program is administered through the department's Division of Community Revitalization, which assists in repairing and rebuilding homes destroyed or damaged by Hurricane Helene. Governor Josh Stein saying in a press release, quote, "Too many families in western North Carolina lost their homes after Hurricane Helene. This program will help people rebuild their homes and their lives after the storm." The Renew NC single-family housing program, supported by $807 million in federal funding, is designed to meet the remaining long-term recovery needs of homeowners in western North Carolina. The program prioritizes low to moderate income families living in communities that suffered severe storm damage following the most destructive storm in state history. North Carolina Commerce Secretary Lee Lilly said in a press release, quote, "Getting people home is where recovery really begins for survivors and their communities. And Renew NC is focused on getting our most vulnerable families home. We will continue working closely with our local and state partners to make sure that recovery reaches every corner of the impacted areas in western North Carolina." According to the press release, since its launch, Renew NC teams have been working directly in communities to connect with residents and ensure recovery resources reach those that need it most. To date, Renew NC has conducted assessments on 207 properties, including those with unrepaired damage from Hurricane Helene. Those evaluations, according to Renew NC, provide critical information for environmental reviews and form the foundations for appropriate recovery applications. Those applications are open to homeowners in 29 different counties across the central and western half of the state. These programs are supported by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, and a more than $1.4 billion grant given to the state of North Carolina. Homeowners seeking more information about this program can visit renewnc.org or visit our website this morning, carolinajournal.com. We've got all of the application information linked up on our website. Well, that's going to do it for a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back with you tomorrow morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.